We always hear about land trusts. People think land trusts are the way you get rich and do all kinds of amazing things, like land trusts can make my teenagers behave, that kind of stuff, right? So just a full panacea for all of life's problems, these land trusts are. Uh, Potential new client wants to form a land trust for anonymity and owning a property. They want to make an offer under the trust name. Okay. But the trust wouldn't be filed that quickly. Lots of problems with this question. Welcome to episode 118 of the Weekly Docket, a podcast by the Silberman Law Firm where we talk legal news and practical law. Today is April 17th, 2026. I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm, and your host, and I'm joined by Chris Hield, who's the firm's supervising attorney. Chris, I like the beard. Tell me about it. Did you just decide one day I'm going beard, or how did that decision come about?
I didn't know if anybody noticed. Just one of those things. I'm 42 years old and I've never done it. So if I should leave this earth, I should try it once.
It looks good. It looks good.
Thank you, sir.
You look wiser. You look more mature, more distinguished. I feel good about this decision.
Hey, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead with just gonna short show. We got to answer like 2 or 3 questions. So legal question section. That's all we have. Military. We're just jumping into it, Chris. All right, military status affidavits. Normally, you see these for evictions and default judgments. Can you just tell us what you know?
That's it. I know that you must file an affidavit that says this person is not in military service. And I hope you're going to shed some light on that to me, because surely I'm still allowed to get defaults and evict the great members of our armed services if they wrong me or if they don't pay their rent. But I think it has more to do if they're serving overseas. We don't want them coming home to, being evicted. But I know it's a thing. I don't know the nuances to it. Like I said, I'm sure you can still sue people in the military or evict them. We just don't want them coming home from fighting in a war to find out they've been booted out of their house.
Yeah, that's certainly the policy behind it. The idea being, before we do something as drastic or an eviction or take a default judgment against somebody, we want to make sure that they're not on active military duty. You as the plaintiff or somebody with knowledge in an eviction or a lawsuit where you're trying to seek, some type of default judgment, you have to satisfy the court through personal knowledge. That's what an affidavit is. An affidavit is, it's a signed statement. You got to satisfy the court through personal knowledge, saying, hey, I know that this person is not in the military. So Chris, how much you know that?
Yeah. Well, and what if they are? Like, if I breach a contract with you and I just say, member of the military, you can't get a default judgment against me.
And we should be very careful. It's not just a member of the military, it's active duty military status, right? Just to be clear. But yeah.
No, to your question, there's a website we use. And I know we run searches, and if you have their social security number, you can certainly find them. Mm-hmm. But we seem to never have people's social security numbers. That's not information people freely hand out when they, commit a tort or a breach of contract. They don't say, oh, well, also here's my social security number in case you need it.
We don't see it too often in the context of default judgments. I mean, you have to have one, but in evictions, it comes up all the time. And to your point, the personal knowledge is typically this SCRA report. Okay. And you go to the government website. I think you need a login and you complete the information and it can give you a printout. I cannot recall. Have you done that recently? It is requiring the social now. So
since I've done it, I've had our property people do it for me.
Yeah.
Like every time, I try to run it, it always comes back as no results. So, and they delete your login after like 6 months. So if you don't log in within 6 months, you have to set up a whole new account.
Yeah, the no results is the one you want if you're the plaintiff. And I can't remember if it requires a social, or maybe you could do it with like a birth date and a name combination. I'm not sure. Um, but yeah, that's it. That just by virtue of running the report, attaching the report to the affidavit, that's what gives you personal knowledge. There are some instances where some courts might take personal knowledge without a report, an SCRA report, where you say something like, "Well, I have personal knowledge they're not on active duty because," and you just sort of establish why they're not on active duty military, right? Because I just saw the guy yesterday, and he was, so that might work.
Unless he could have gone and enlisted yesterday.
You
never
You
know.
never know. He was called up that quickly. There is, and sometimes you just don't know. In an eviction situation, you might just not know. Sometimes, even in a civil kind of breach of contract claim, you might just not know. And the affidavit could simply say, "I don't know." And if the answer is, "I don't know," there, at least in the eviction context, there is a process that's beyond the scope of this legal question where you can go through to get it satisfied. There's some additional safeguards, I think, when you're testifying that you don't know whether he's in in active duty military or not. But um,
This is also a little odd to me because, nobody knows this, but I grew up on a military base, and I don't see military people here, even though we live in a huge city. I just assume people here are not military. If you're military, you live on a military base
Yeah.
where everybody's military. So how often is it that somebody's actually active duty military? It seems,
yeah,
if we lived in a military city, maybe if we were in San Antonio,
right.
where there's a little bit more of a military presence, but it doesn't seem like it's all that common here.
No, but San Antonio is the one where it does come up. So important takeaway here is, if you're going to do an eviction, you're going to do a default judgment. Hopefully, it's going to require a military status affidavit. Go to the website. Hopefully, you got some information to trigger a report. That's your basis for the personal knowledge. And then you sign the affidavit saying, "Hey, he's not active duty military. Judge, let's proceed with the eviction. Let's proceed with the default judgment." Policy being, we don't want to do bad things to active duty military. So, yeah. All right. Next question. I think you will know the answer to this one. Can heirs partition a homestead property if a spouse is still living there? So living there under spousal life estate, right? So they were married, and let's just say the spouse dies, and then it was the deceased spouse's separate property. So then the spouse is now living there under a spousal homestead, right? And the deceased spouse either left the property by will to his children or through intestacy to his children. And those children now want to force a sale of the property and force the spousal homestead, force the spouse, to move. Can they do that?
My answer is no. We have had situations where we've tried to get creative, say the surviving spouse just isn't taking care of the property, is not paying the mortgage, is not paying the taxes, is letting it fall into disrepair. And we try to make the argument, well, you basically abandon your homestead right. Otherwise, what do we have to do? Just let it fall into complete disrepair and let the taxing authority foreclose on it?
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever actually gotten them out. We either, get a settlement or we figure something else out. But short answer, no. Homestead rights are absolute. We don't kick widows and orphans out of homes. That would be the most monstrous thing we could do. So we will not do it.
Yeah, and that's right. This comes straight from the Texas Constitution. On the death of the husband or wife, the homestead shall descend and vest in the regular kind of way. And but it shall not, here's the operative language, it shall not be partitioned among the heirs of the deceased during the lifetime of the surviving husband and wife, or so long as the survivor may elect to use it or occupy the same as a homestead. So you get into this issue, you try to argue, well, they abandoned it, they weren't intending to occupy it. The courts are fairly reluctant to make that determination. Has that been your experience, Chris?
Yeah, for the reasons I said, it's just held out as this really high level. there's just some protections we get in Texas, and the Texas Constitution really values homestead. And that's something everybody knows, and it's something that gets beaten into our heads in law school. You just don't mess with a homestead.
Absolutely. All right. Final question, short show today. Land trusts. We always hear about land trusts. People think land trusts are the way you get rich and do all kinds of amazing things, like land trusts can make my teenagers behave, that kind of stuff, right? So just a full panacea for all of life's problems, these land trusts are. Potential new client wants to form a land trust for anonymity and owning a property. They want to make an offer under the trust name. Okay. But the trust wouldn't be filed that quickly. Lots of problems with this question, Chris, in Texas anyway. Is there a way to do that, or to change the name from who the offer is made to the trust as a purchaser, where the name on the offer never shows up as part of the transaction? This is like 4 questions in one. Let me give you one. Let me give you one at a time. Okay. So first of all, do you typically make offers or do deeds in the name of the trust?
No. Well, I mean, you can. A lot of times, if you don't have the entity, like if it's going to be an LLC or something else, because a trust is not technically an entity, you can always do Phil Silberman or assigns, right? If you know you're going to buy a property, you just get contract, you get your name on there, and you say or assigns, and then you form your entity later, or you form the trust later. And then when you get to closing, you can just say, hey, I assign this to the trust. I want this deed to go to the trust. I don't know if you're asking this question or not. It wouldn't be the Phil Silberman trust. I have seen, the one example I saw was an Illinois transaction where they just said the Phil Silberman trust instead of Phil Silberman as trustee of the Phil Silberman land trust. Here in Texas,
you're answering the question. I mean, you're answering the question, right? I just sometimes, me being a lawyer, you being a lawyer, sometimes I need to maybe interpret my fellow lawyers a bit for the listeners. I would simply say, Chris very much for a long time has been the staunch defender of the trust not being an actual legal entity, and the trustee being the one that is actually the legal binding party. You would agree with that statement, right, Chris? So
yeah, we've had a couple cases where it's very clear. Right? A trust is a legal relationship. It is not a legal entity.
That's why you always see the contract would historically be named in Bill Smith as trustee for so-and-so trust. But recently there was a property code provision, a new law came out, said section, I think 114, I've got it over here, I'm going to read it, 114.087, effective September 23. It was just meant to say that real estate deeds can name a trust instead of a trustee, but it doesn't alter any of that relationship. And what it was trying to do, sometimes the legislature will go back and it will take a common practice like deeding and contracting in the name of the trust and try to clean that up so we don't have to do all of this litigation and these problems with, that deed wasn't in the name of the trustee and all that. The legislature said no more. Okay. It's we're just saying that you could put the name, the deed of the trust rather than trustee. It doesn't invalidate the deed, but the actual relationship, the trust not being an entity and the trustee still being the person that's contracting, that doesn't, the hundreds of years of Texas law doesn't change. Okay. So, now the next thing is, as part of this question about objection compound question, where you're asking 5 questions in one. They want to make an offer under the trust name, fine. Okay. But the trust isn't filed. We don't file trusts in Texas, right, Chris?
Not typically. I mean, as you point out all the time, you can file anything. And usually what they want is a certificate of trust. A bank or a title company wants to just see something certified by you that says, this is the trust. It was created by instrument, dated this date. So-and-so is the trustee, because if they don't have the actual document of public record, they need something that they can point to that says, okay, this person is representing under penalty of perjury that they are the trustee of this trust.
Yeah.
And they probably are examining the trust anyway. It's just not a public record. So they say, okay, fine, we examined the trust and you gave us the certificate of trust that we can record so that, that is in the records.
Yeah. And yes, the certificate of trust for that purpose. So yeah, you don't file them in the real property records, although you could, to your point, they'll file them, but I think what they're asking here is you don't file them. The Secretary of State doesn't take trust filings last time I checked, the Texas Secretary of State anyway. Right. So, are you aware? I don't think they do. Are you aware of any?
I can file a trust in the real property records.
Yeah,
I can.
Yes, but it's not like you form an LLC and you file a certificate of formation with the Secretary of State. If you want to form a trust, you whip out, Word or ChatGPT now, and you say draft trust documents, and the trustor, the grantor signs, and you have a trust. You would agree with that, right?
That's it. Yeah, you don't have to make it public. That's why we do the certificate.
Yeah,
because it doesn't have to be public, because we do run into so many problems, and I understand you kind of want to clean up some of this stuff, like you said, the ABC trust. Well, are you saying the deed is ineffective? Are you saying we have to go litigate this? If you're going to say, fine, look, we all know what they meant, let's not split hairs over this. It goes to the ABC trust. Whoever the trustee of the ABC trust is now in charge of this property. Okay, great. But we have literally had more than one where something is in the name of the trust and someone says, oh yeah, I thought mom and dad had a trust, but I've never seen it.
Yeah.
So we have no trust instrument. We have land that's in the name of a trust and we have no trust instrument. That's not where you want to be.
No, that's a very complicated problem, because then it's like, well, what is there a trust? Was there a trust? Is it, in that case, the deed might be invalid, right? If you don't have a trust. So, to put a bow on this thing, button it up or whatever, you don't have to file a trust with the Secretary of State. Trusts can just arise out of contractual formation, using a Word document or some kind of other documentation. The new law in Texas, relatively recent law, you don't, to protect anonymity, you can contract in the name of a trust. If any banks or anybody wants to see who's behind it, they can ask for a trust certificate to get the real information. And that new law, we're trying to say, all right, you want a land trust, we'll respect the anonymous component of that in Texas, and we're not going to say it invalidates any deed. So if you're trying to do a deal in this case, and you're worried about FERA doesn't need a filing, but you want to do a contract out there, don't put a made up trust out there and do an offer when you don't have any underlying trust documents. I think that would be problematic. So,
well, I worry about what that's going to do to people who are less than honest, because we're seeing this all the time. And, you hear commercials on the radio now about this.
Mm-hmm.
You and I, when we first opened up and we're looking at this and saying, it's so easy to do a deed. And there's so many common names out there that if people realize how easy it was to do a deed, those less than honest people can cause some real trouble. And this, unfortunately, I feel like this just opens the door to more of that stuff. I can go make up a fake trust name, and then I can say, oh, I'm the trustee of this trust. And all I have to do is get 1 out of 10 people to fall for it and pay me money. And there's no identifying information on there. You're never going to track me down.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like it.
Well, look, Chris, good news for us. We don't represent any untrustworthy people, and we never come across any opposing parties that are untrustworthy. So we do not have to worry about this at all. And with that completely preposterous statement, that brings our show to a close. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Chris Hill has been my co-host today. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcasts. And as a reminder, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com. Tell us you want it publicly answered in the podcast. Everybody have a great rest of your day and weekend.